Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Rama Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Yashoda Nandana Vajrajana Ranjana Yashoda Yashoda Nandana Vajrajana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Yashoda Nandana Vajrajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Vajrajana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Jaya Radha Madhava Ravi Jain to Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Sri Śrimad Abhay Charanara Vindabhaktan Prabhupada ki ISKCON BBG Founder Acharya save the whole world Sri Prabhupada ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Sri Śrimad Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindaki, Namacharya Shavaya Stakuriki, Paramahansa Guru Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaura Bhaktivinoda, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, all Guru Sambharis, all Guru Sambharis, all Guru Sri Guru and Sri Guru, all Guru Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Is it verse 26? Sarva Bhaksha Dvija Vrityai Sarva Bhaksha Dvija Vrityai Sarva Bhaksha Dvija Vrityai Drita Vidya Tapo Vrataha Drita Vidya Tapo Vrataha Dritya Vidya Tapo Dripaha Sarva Bhaksha Dvija Vrityai Drita Vidya Tapo Vrataha Vita Dahendriyarama Vita Dehendriyarama Vita Dehendriyarama Yachaka Vicharantu Iha Yachaka Vicharantviha Yachaka Vicharantviha Vita Dehendriyarama Yachaka Vicharantviha Sarva Bhaksha Dvijavrityai Vritta Vidya Tapo Vrataha Vita Dehendriyarama Yachaka Vicharantviha Sarva Bhaksha Dvijavrityai Vritta Vidya Tapo Vrataha Vita Dehendriyarama Yachaka Vicharantviha. Sarvabhaksha, eating everything. Dvija, the Brahmanas. Vrityai, for maintaining the body. Drita Vidya, having taken to education. Tapa, austerity. Vrataha, and vows. Vita, money. Deha, the body. Indriya, the senses. Aramaha, the satisfaction. Yachakaha, as beggars. Vicharantu, let them wander. Iha, here. Translation, purport. By Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. These brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows only for the purpose of maintaining the body. They shall be devoid of discrimination between what to eat and what not to eat. They will acquire money, begging from door to door, simply for the satisfaction of the body. Responsively, please. These brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows.
These brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows
only for the purpose of maintaining the body.
only for the purpose of maintaining the body.
They shall be devoid of discrimination
They shall be devoid of discrimination
between what to eat and what not to eat.
between what to eat and what not to eat.
They will acquire money,
They will acquire money,
begging from door to door,
begging from door to door,
simply for the satisfaction of the body.
simply for the satisfaction of the body.
Report. The third curse inflicted by Nandishvara on the Brahmanas who supported Daksha is completely functioning in the age of Kali. Prabhupada says that, completely functioning. The so-called Brahmanas are no longer interested in understanding the nature of the Supreme Brahman, although a Brahmana means one who has attained knowledge about Brahman. In the Vedanta Sutra, it is also said, Atato Brahma Jikyasa. This human form of life is meant for realization of the Supreme Brahman. There's a nice verse that we quote in deity worship quite a lot. Om Tad, what's that? Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Pashanti Suraya Divi Vichaksharatam. Tad Vipraso Vivijan Jagri Vigun Samsamidate Vishnu Yat Paramam Padam. That just as you can see the sun in the sky with ordinary vision, so the Brahmanas with their transcendental vision, they can actually see the abode of Lord Vishnu. And because they can see the abode of Lord Vishnu, they're able to reveal that abode to others. So this is meant to be the nature of a Brahmana. Yet we see here, Prabhupada's explaining what's going on in this present age. They have no vision at all because they don't even understand who Brahman is. This human form of life is meant for realization of the Supreme Brahman, the absolute truth. Or in other words, human life is meant for one's elevation to the post of a Brahmana. Unfortunately, the modern Brahmanas, or so-called Brahmanas, who come in originally Brahminical families, have left their own occupational duties, but they do not allow others to occupy the posts of Brahmanas. Very strong criticism from Srila Prabhupada here. The qualifications for Brahmanas are described in the scriptures, in the Śrimad-Bhāgavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and all other Vedic literatures. Brahmana is not a hereditary title or position. If someone from a non-Brahmin family, for example, one born in the family of Shudras, tries to become a Brahmana by being properly qualified under the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master, these so-called Brahmanas will object. Such Brahmanas, having been cursed by Nandishvara, are actually in a position where they have no discrimination between eatables and non-eatables, and simply live to maintain the perishable material body and its family. Such fallen conditioned souls are not worthy to be called Brahmanas, but in Kali Yuga they claim to be Brahmanas, and if a person actually tries to attain the Brahminical qualifications, they try to hinder his progress. This is the situation in the present age. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu condemned this principle very strongly. During his conversation with Ramananda Roy, he said that regardless of whether a person is born in a Brahmana family or a Shudra family, regardless of whether he is a householder or a sannyasi, if he knows the science of Krishna, he must be a spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had many so-called Shudra disciples like Haridas Thakur and Ramananda Roy. Even the Goswamis, who were principal students of Lord Chaitanya, were also ostracized from the Brahmana society. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by his grace, made them first-class Vaishnavas. Just read the verse again. These Brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows only for the purpose of maintaining the body. They shall be devoid of discrimination between what to eat and what not to eat. They will acquire money, begging from door to door, simply for the satisfaction of the body. So Srila Prabhupada is giving a very, very strong statement here, or making a very strong statement here about so-called Brahmanas in this age of Kali. And myself, I've had quite a bit of practical experience in this regard. A couple of stories I can think of. One time I was in a place called Bankura in the middle of West Bengal, and I was arranging to get some deities carved. And during the day, I would go to the Gaudiya Math temple to take lunch. And I struck up quite a good friendship with the members of the Gaudiya Math there. And one day I turned up for lunch, and I asked them, there's a big festival going up. Like the gateway, there was a building on the left-hand side of the gate, or actually looking at the gate from the right-hand side. And there's a big function going on there, they had the pandals up and all that sort of stuff. And I asked them what was going on. They started laughing. And I said, what's funny? He said, Brahman Diksha. And I thought, well, that's not very funny. They said, meat-eating Brahmana. Mm-hmm. And this is the point that Nandishvara he's making here. He's cursed them that they'll have no discrimination with what to eat and not what not to eat. Another time I was down in Udupi, which is where Udupi Krishna is a very, very beautiful deity and wonderful temple. And just near the temple, in part of the temple compound, they have this big kund. It's I don't know, maybe 200 yards by 200 yards, maybe a little bit smaller than that. And they regularly have this function, because in the middle of the kund there's a statue of Madhvacharya, and they have this regular function where they will take the Utsav deity from the temple, they put on a barge or a boat kind of thing, and they take the deity, the temple deity will circumambulate Madhvacharya. And when we were there, one of the devotees I was with, he was Brahman initiated devotee. He got on the boat to go and have a look at the deity of Madhvacharya. And the people there, they got very upset about that. And he's like, only Brahmins can go on the boat. And we mentioned, well, these initiated Brahmins, they wouldn't accept. And even we find in ISKCON that sometimes devotees who come from India won't accept that a Western, it's just so ingrained in the psyche that they can't accept that someone from a country outside of India could possibly become a Brahmana. So it's quite a deeply ingrained concept. But as we know, it is described in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, how if one, even if one's born in a low-class family, or so-called low-class family, if they're initiated by a bona fide spiritual master, then they can become a qualified Brahmana. And this is the point that Prabhupada is also making here, is through the process of initiation, through the process of being connected to a bona fide sampradaya, then one does become a Brahmana. And this is a really important point about our Siddhanta, which is being presented by all our acharyas, is that it's not by birth that one becomes qualified. It's by diksha that one becomes qualified. By being connected to a bona fide sampradaya, then one is able to come to the point of being a Brahmana. But again, it doesn't mean, this is a misconception also within ISKCON. It doesn't mean that just by being initiated, you get Brahman Diksha, that now you're a Brahmana. But Prabhupada would often say initiation means to begin. So once we begin the process of initiation, then one works on developing the qualities of a brahmana. And we'll see in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and sudras. And we see that when Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about brahmanas and kshatriyas, he talks about qualities, but when he's talking about vaishyas and sudras, he talks about activities. So this is also an important point to understand, is a brahmana is not known by activities. A brahmana is known by qualities. Otherwise, Krishna would have explained the activities. And so we see, he says, Samadhamma taposacham chantarajam mevacha jnanam vijnanam astakam brahma kama sabhavajam. That peacefulness, self-control, samadhamma tapa performs this there, socham, purity, honesty, wisdom, religiousness, natural qualities by which a brahmana works. And we see that, in Kali, that if someone has some external identification, external activity of a brahmana, then people will accept them as brahmana. Someone born in a brahmana family, well, he's a brahmana. And you can't become a brahmana because you're not born in a brahmana family. This is a common, especially in India, this is a common misunderstanding. And even I've seen, you go to Vrindavan, for instance, you get on a rickshaw, and you see these rickshaw holders, they've got Brahman threads. You ask them what their caste is, they'll tell you you're a brahmana. But here they are, they're pushing a rickshaw, they're very unclean, very niggardly looking people. And it's understood that if someone works, like for a brahmana to work for someone else, is actually considered a very degraded situation. Of course, in ISKCON we don't follow this one so strictly, but when someone's strictly trying to apply caste because they're born in a particular caste, then they should also understand the qualities associated with that caste. They're working for someone, they're pushing a rickshaw, and they consider themselves brahmanas, and they're proud of it. This is the thing, there's a lot of pride there. And this is one of the things that really comes out in this pastime here, is the danger of pride. Even we see someone in a position like Daksha, who is a very, very elevated person, is almost on the same level as Lord Brahma. Prabhupada describes in some of his purports here. And we see also in other places where you were reading the other day, how Brahma is almost on the same level as Krishna. Brahma is quite a powerful personality. He's actually able to create from his own body. Whereas we see the other creators, they have to engage in creating with a wife or whatever, in some way like this. They can't just create from their own, just like Krishna does. He creates from his own body. He expands himself in so many different ways. Yet we see here also in this section here, it talks about how Daksha is a great, great personality. Yet because he had pride, because he became proud of his position, when he walked into the arena to do the Daksha Yajna, he was so effulgent that everyone stood up and honored him, except Lord Shiva. And he didn't like that. He really struggled with that. Because Lord Shiva married his daughter, therefore he was thinking that he was superior to Lord Shiva. And even he didn't want, there's a story of old, earlier on, you'll see how he didn't want his daughter to marry Lord Shiva because he felt that Lord Shiva was not a very nice person, because he associated himself with people in the mode of ignorance, so he considered, Lord Shiva dressed very simply. Yet again, he was judging based on externals, and this is the point that Nandishvara is making here about these brahmanas, is they will be judged by externals, and they will judge things by externals. But we cannot understand the process of bhakti by externals. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he also makes this point about, like in this age, you'll see how people who sometimes they wear tilak and they have neck beads, they're seen as devotees. And here in the purport, Prabhupada's making the same comparison. Is in this age of Kali, because of externalities, people will consider someone to be a brahmana. But this is not what a brahmana is about. Brahmana iti, what is it? Brahman iti Brahmana. Is a Brahmana is one who knows Brahman. As this verse on Tal Vishnu says, they can actually see the abode of Vishnu. They're able to reveal the abode to others. Because why? Because they understand. It's not like, they click their fingers and automatically you see, the spiritual world in the sky. Through knowledge. This is the business of a Brahmana, is to give knowledge. Through knowledge, they help others to see the abode of the Lord. And it was seen, especially in this age of Kali, that everything is judged based on externals. If you have a lot of money, you're considered to be a great person. If you have a nice house, nice car, nice wife, nice this, nice that, you're considered to be a great person. Very, very desirable. And you look at, like I was thinking when we were coming here on the subway yesterday, I was actually reflecting on this, how in this age of Kali, men and women are attracted to each other based on externals. If a woman has an attractive body, if a man's handsome, has a nice job, has income, whatever, then there's attraction there. But just looking at someone's external features gives you no indication of their qualities as a person. And when we're engaging in a relationship with someone, and this is the Vedic science of astrology, would look at the qualities and see the compatibility. And this is why you'll find in this day and age, first off, people don't get married anymore, but why divorce and separation is so high. In a cultured society, because the choices are made not based on externalities, because the choices are made based on compatibility, qualities, then and also the persons would have, the qualities themselves. They would have a sense of duty. They would have a sense of what is right and what is wrong in life, because the decisions were made based on character, qualities, and people were principled. Then you don't hear about divorce. You won't read in the pages of Bhagavatam how Lord Shiva divorced his wife, for instance. It's just not there, because people made their decisions based on more than just external attraction. And this is the age of Kali. Everything is very much externalities. People are attracted by externalities. And so this is the point that Nandishvara is making, how these brahmanas, because they were attracted to Daksha because of his position, because of his opulence, and also because he was maintaining them. And this is a very, very degraded position for a brahmana to be in. Because when one is maintained or supported by someone, you have to support that person who's maintaining you. You have to, just like we see with Bhishma, he couldn't go against Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra because they were maintaining him. So he was in a compromised position. So also for a brahmana, and a brahmana gets in a position where they're maintained by somebody, and they become dependent upon that, then they're in a compromised position. One of the key characteristics of a brahmana is this need to maintain neutrality. This need to, well, not just neutrality, sorry, but independence. They need to be independent. Because a brahmana, the duty of a brahmana is to speak the truth. But if we're in this situation where we're being, excuse me, maintained by somebody, and we're completely, we put ourselves in this position where we become dependent upon that person for maintenance, then in order to protect the maintenance, especially you've got family, children, this whole thing is all, if I say something against this person, they won't give me my maintenance, therefore how will I maintain my family? This is not a Brahminical perspective, Brahminical consciousness. A Brahmin will say the truth and depend upon the Lord, not depend upon some rich person to maintain them. And that's the difference. And this is the thing we also need to cultivate within our devotional service, is to become dependent upon Krishna, not to become dependent upon wealthy people or rich people or whatever. We have to become dependent upon Krishna. This is the position of being a Brahmana. And there's a lot that could be said about Brahmanas. But, one thing I find interesting here about this whole pastime also is how Daksha, even though he was in a very, very powerful position, he was created from the body of Brahma, there's a series of verses in the 5th chapter of the 5th canto where Lord Rishabdev is explaining to his sons, that chapter he gives instruction to his 100 sons. He's explaining the positions of all the different personalities, and I can't remember the detail, but then he starts off by saying that human beings, like you start off, you have non-moving living entities, moving living entities. So the non-moving living entities like trees and grass and all these things, they're superior to matter. Then superior to them are the moving living entities. So you have animals, four-legged animals, and superior to them are the two-legged animals, and superior to them are human beings. Superior to the human beings are ghosts and things like that. Then it starts getting into the Gandharvas and the Prachetas and all these types of people. Then Daksha, Daksha comes up there. Then you have other demigods like Indra and can't remember who else. There was another one demigod there. Then above that you have I can't remember the other ones, but somewhere above that you have Lord Shiva. Then above Lord Shiva you had Lord Brahma. So there's a gradation of superiority. And Rishabh Dev is explaining that, how Brahma, because he's the father of all of that, David is, even though Lord Shiva is such a great Vaishnava, greater Vaishnava than Lord Brahma, because he's the son of Brahma, then Brahma is his father. He's seen as being superior. And Brahma also has the capacity, as I was saying before, how all the living entities, they just come out of his body. They don't have to have a father. So a father and mother. And so there's this gradation there. And so Daksha, even understanding this, he couldn't accept it because of his pride. And so this is one of the great lessons that comes from this pastime for me, is the danger of pride. Even if you're in a great position, even if you're a very, very elevated devotee, as we have an expression in English, pride cometh before the fall. So if we develop pride, we find that we will lose knowledge, we'll lose understanding. Prabhupada makes this point also in the Bhagavad Gita, in one of his purports, I think in the 13th chapter, how without humility one cannot have knowledge. So you'll see this happens. This is what happened to Daksha. Because he was proud of his position. He was thinking that he was a great progenitor. His body was so effulgent. Described how he's more effulgent than the sun. People would just be dazzled wherever he went, and he became proud of that. And as a result of this pride, he offended the greatest of Vaishnavas, Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. And therefore, this brought about his downfall. And this is what's going on here. There's all this cursing and counter-cursing, and eventually, Daksha, because Nandishvar, I can't remember if it's already happened or not, but Nandishvar, one of the associates of Nandishvar, actually cuts off the head of Daksha. They take the sacrificial instrument meant for sacrificing the animal, and they use that for cutting off Daksha's head. And then so later on we find that Lord Brahma, he comes there, because he wasn't in attendance because he knew of this animosity, and therefore he wouldn't go, because he knew it would come to no good. So he wasn't there, and he came later and he saw the situation, and he asked Lord Shiva, he directed Lord Shiva to rectify the situation. But what had happened was Daksha's head had been thrown into the sacrificial fire, so his head was burnt. So he couldn't move that. So, and there was a goat there that was also being sacrificed, so he gave him the head of a goat, which is kind of funny because one of the definitions of Daksha is given means he's very expert at sex life. We know that goats are also very expert at sex life, and very attracted to sex life. So it's kind of quite significant that he wound up with the head of a goat. But anyhow, we see, I think in one of the subsequent chapters here, Daksha, after he gets given the head of a goat, somehow or other he gets some intelligence, and he realizes, and this is kind of also interesting, because even though he's got the head of a goat, he still has the intelligence to be able to offer prayers to Lord Shiva. And so he offers prayers to Lord Shiva. He realizes his mistake, and he offers prayers to Lord Shiva. And as a result of those prayers, Lord Shiva blesses him. And this is the nature of Lord Shiva. He's very His Ashutosh means he's very easily pleased, but he's also very easily angered. And so Daksha had upset him, but by the prayers, Lord Shiva became happy to bestow his blessings upon him. And so what happens after this pastime, which is really interesting, because in this sort of manifestation of Daksha, he was born from the body of Lord Brahma. So he had a very, very elevated birth. Then what happens later, this is described by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, how because of his offense of offending Lord Shiva, the next time he took birth, he was born from the body of a woman, from Marisha. And he had to perform tapasya. And so this pastime here takes place in the advent of, during the advent of Swayambhuva Manu. And then his next manifestation of Daksha was in the sixth Manvantara, or the sixth Manu, I think Chakshusha. And so he was performing tapasya right from the second Manu through to the sixth Manu. So he was performing tapasya for a long, long time, so he could get take up again the service he'd been given by Lord Brahma of creating progeny. So, point being that even though he was a great personality, he was overcome by pride and the devastating effect that had for him, where he lost his body. He gave up the body. He had to perform tapasya for many, many years, and he had a very, very high birth, where he wasn't born from an ordinary living entity, and he came to the point where he was actually born from the body of a Kshatriya woman. So he became quite degraded because of that pride. So for us, we should take this lesson very, very seriously. Try to understand how pride manifests in us and the dangers of pride. And we see this, we see this with ourselves, we see this with others, how we become proud. I mean, because we need to understand that ultimately everything we're able to do is coming about by the mercy of Krishna. Because here we are, the jiva, it's called anu, atomic. We're situated within the region of the heart. And we have no capacity, so tiny, we have no capacity to do anything. The body is moved, is motivated, is stirred into life by the presence of the supersoul. And it's only the supersoul fulfilling the desire of the jiva based on guna and karma that we're able to achieve anything. Like you see, some people might be very, very expert in sports, to give an example. And they become proud thinking they're so wonderful. But if they understood the science of Krishna consciousness, they would understand that actually I'm just the jiva inside, just desiring to do something. But by the agency of the super soul, the body is brought to life. The body is able to do things. But they're taking credit for themselves, whereas a devotee will always understand it's only by the mercy of Krishna that I'm able to achieve this. It's only by the mercy of the Lord that I can do anything. So this is the beginning of not developing pride, is to understand that everything is brought about by the agency of the Lord, and therefore we'll see that a devotee in the prayers, well, you look at Lord Brahma's prayers for creative energy, and he's offering some very wonderful prayers there, and in those prayers, he's accepting that everything he has, even his intelligence, his ability to create, is coming from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Daksha, on the other hand, in this pastime, he's thinking, by my power, I'm doing everything. By my power, by my effulgence, people are bowing down and worshipping me. I came across an interesting definition of a demigod yesterday also. This word Devam, we often take it to mean demigod. Srila Prabhupada translated it, or said it literally means one who's worshipped by their dependents. So you see that anyone who gets into a big position, just like you look at these politicians and people, their dependents might not be offering them artis and things like that, but they worship them by following their instructions. They bow down to them literally. So when we get in this position where we have people, bowing down to us and wanting to touch our feet and all this type of stuff, the tendency is to become proud. And so we have to be very, very careful to avoid that. And as we progress in devotional service, you'll find that this happens more and more. That naturally people will become attracted to you. Naturally people will want to offer you respect. Because it's natural that people will respect someone who's a great devotee. And so we must be very, very careful that we don't become attracted to this, that we don't become affected by this, because that's the tendency, is when people start to bow down to you, you think you're something special. You think you're something wonderful. Because, oh, I must be, look, they're bowing down at my feet. I must be a great person. But no, we should always maintain this understanding, as Lord Chaitanya explains to his followers, is Gopibhata Padakamloy, Dasa, Dasa, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a, none of these things. I only identify myself as a servant of a servant of a servant of a servant of the lotus feet of the Master of the Gopis. We always take this position of being a servant will be protected from false ego. Daksha took the position of being superior. Therefore, pride destroyed him. And this is what will happen to us if we become proud. Pride will destroy us. We have to be very, very careful about pride. And for me, this is one of the big lessons of this pastime. Okay, any comments, questions? Yes, Will.
How many? And he was talking about the second offense, and he was saying that Shiva has more or closer qualities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead than Narayan is above him. Is that correct? And then, like that Shiva has more qualities of Krishna than Brahma.
Yeah.
And yet he's inferior based on birth from Brahma. Can you explain how that would work?
Well, it's just like Kapila Dev was born from Karma Muni and Devahuti, but he was God.
Yeah.
Shiva describes, what's that verse? Chiram yata didabhikara vishesha yoga sanjayate nahitata kritakashta heto yashambhutam samabhaiti karyan govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. That just as milk is transformed into yogurt by the action of acids, so Lord Shiva is a transformation of Vishnu for the performance of the work of destruction in the material world. So Lord Shiva, in a sense, is Krishna in a manifestation where he comes into contact with the most material nature. He's not an ordinary living entity. He's not a human being like you and me, whereas Brahma is a human being. But in one sense, we're all transformations of Krishna's energy, but it was separated. Whereas Shiva, he has a particular function, and he is, in essence, Krishna himself transformed. Because we say that Krishna can't come into contact with the material nature, but he does as Shiva. So yes, he has. Brahma has 55 of the qualities. This is described in the Nectar Devotion. Brahma has 55 of the qualities. Shiva has 58. Narayan has 60. And Krishna has 64. He has these 4 sweet qualities. Pastimes, flute, form. But they're all very, very sweet. This is the difference between. Actually, Nrsimha was explaining that the other day, wasn't he? Talking about how with Narayan, it's very much about the Aishvarya kind of, but Krishna is about the sweetness, is Madhuram. He has Madhura Rupa, Madhura Vila, Madhura associates, and also the flute. So yeah, that's the nature of Shiva. He's quite an extraordinary personality, but out of humility, he accepts his father as superior, even though he's not. See, like, if you're humble, the concept of superior and inferior is not on your radar, because you always see yourself as a servant. If you're proud, then whenever you walk into a room, you'll be looking at people. This one got initiated after me. This one, 2 days before me, and it's all like, even I've seen like one person got in the same yagya, got initiated, just before them. So they see this one as being superior. This is coming from the perspective of pride, because you're gauging everything in terms of how much respect I'm going to get. And it can be quite subconscious, sometimes it's very conscious. Well, why are they being asked to give class? I got initiated before them. What's that got to do with it? It's like we should understand it's like, this person has knowledge to share, let them share. Don't be so caught up by whether someone is, senior or not, or your perceived idea of being senior or not. We see Lord Shiva doesn't have that. Even though he is superior to Brahma in every way, except the fact that he's come from his body. And even like Lord Shiva's, he just comes out from between the eyes. I mean, that's pretty unusual. So we can see it's not an ordinary mundane manifestation. But because he's devoid of pride, he doesn't look at the relationship like that. He just sees my father. I offer him respect. And this is where we have to cultivate this kind of concept, is not looking at things from external perspective, but to try to understand things based on Krishna consciousness. Seeing every living entity as a servant. And I was reading, where was I reading this yesterday? I think it was in the 5th canto. How we should see every living entity as a servant of God. The Supreme Lord, actually this is Rishabh's teaching. The Lord is situated in the heart of all living entities. Therefore we should see all living entities and their connection with God, and we should offer respect to all living entities. Not just people who wear, devotional clothing, not just people who chant Hare Krishna. We should see all living entities. Human beings, cats, dogs, birds, whatever. We should see all living entities as part and parcel of God. And therefore, we should respect them, because why? The Lord resides in the heart. And this is one of the prominent teachings of Kapila Deva, is how the Lord is in the heart of all living entities, and we should not envy any living entity. But driven by envy, pride becomes manifest. And this is what we see in this material world. This whole material world is driven by envy. And one of the manifestations of envy is we'll see how people will try to pull others down. If they have something better, they try to pull it down, they try to destroy it, they'll smash it. I can't have it, so I'll break it, so he can't have it either. So envious people as well. So it's good to reflect on these pastimes, reflect on these things that are coming out here, and also then be introspective and look in ourselves, is how am I envious of others? How is this manifesting in my life? And try to dive deeper into the process of Krishna consciousness so we can overcome this pride and envy. Because it's a great enemy of bhakti. Pride is so dangerous. Envy, something you don't want at all. Anything else? Yes, Ru.
You mentioned about complete dependence. I was thinking that because complete dependence on the Lord means complete dependence on material nature. So if somebody has responsibilities, I know we have a higher God, our beings. So if you don't, if you're not completely, if you're completely detached, like if you're completely attached to Brahman, how can you perform your other higher beings? How can you perform your worldly duties if you're completely attached to it?
I think the Bhagavad Gita is a classic example of that, because Arjuna, in the beginning of the Gita, he's thinking that I'm a Kshatriya, I'm the king, I can't do this. It's like by my power it's all going on, and then we see as he surrendered to Krishna, more and more. And that's the evolution of the Gita. You see how Arjuna surrenders to Krishna, and then what does he do? He says, "Shishasteham sarimam tam pravadya." That no, sorry, not the rest. Karashe vachnam tava. That I'll do what you say. So by that surrender to Krishna, he became empowered. And we see in the Gita also how Krishna says, it doesn't really matter whether you fight or not, because all these people are already slain by my arrangement. So you just fight and take the credit. So ultimately, just like, you could think of managing a temple or something like that. Ultimately, it's going on by the arrangement of Krishna. You just, act in Krishna consciousness and you get the glory for it. And so it's the same for all of us, is ultimately these things are happening by the mercy of Krishna. Excuse me, if we surrender to Krishna, we can become an instrument for Krishna. If we don't surrender to Krishna, we become an instrument for Maya. And sometimes we see in temples, especially in temples, I'm just trying to keep it ISKCON specific so it's more relevant to us. I'm not really trying to make any particular comment or judgment. But sometimes we'll see in temples how there's dissenting elements within the temple. And we can see how these dissenting elements generally come about due to a lack of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, we can understand this is the influence of Maya. That the Maya is influencing the devotees in such a way that there's tension or conflict within the temple. But if we're all trying to work cooperatively to push on Krishna consciousness, these types of influences are very minimal. They'll still be there. They won't go away because we're in the material world. And you do have devotees on all different levels. Like our travels, we've seen different temples with devotees of different natures. And we're just in Naperville. And Naperville is really interesting. They have a very wonderful community there. And even though there's quite diverse natures there in the temple, you can see devotees very, very diverse. But because they have this common interest of pushing on Krishna consciousness, they're all working quite diligently at it, then even though their natures are vastly different, still it works because they have this common center. And this is the point, is if we put Krishna in the center of everything, things will work. The temple may not become wealthy or filled up with lots and lots of devotees, but if we put Krishna in the center, you'll find division is less, much less. But if we're trying to put ourselves in the center, then division will increase. Because why? Because we'll have a different center. It's just like, to give a simple example, when you throw a rock into a pool of water, right, you get all these concentric circles. But if you throw a handful of gravel into the water, you get all these overlapping circles, and it's just like disturbance. Whereas when you have concentric circles, it's actually beautiful to see. So when we have, and this is like the same as like when we have our different interests, when our different interests are coming and they're interacting and they're clashing with each other, then it's disturbance. It becomes chaotic. But if we all have this common interest of serving Krishna, and it doesn't mean we give up our individuality. There's still space for individuality, but we just put as the main focus service of Krishna, pleasing Prabhupada. Then we have a common interest, and things will go smoothly, things will go harmoniously. But just by putting Krishna in the center, this is how we become successful in this material world. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all very much for Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna, Jai Shri Prabhupada.